All right, Robert, do you want to make some quick money?
Yeah. This afternoon.
Well, maybe not so quick money, but let me ask you a question. Did you sell your house on or after the year 2010?
Nope.
Well, then you're not going to make some money, but you know who is going to make some money?
You.
Well, me, if I go for this thing, but if our real estate chat viewers are wondering what we're bickering about, we are,
John de Perez.
and Robert Eid. So in the US, there was this massive lawsuit against major real estate brands, and it's a commission lawsuit, basically alleging that the real estate commissions are high. They've been high for many years, and as prices have gone up and up and up over the years, the commissions, even though they remained at, let's say, 5%, they're 5% off of, a 300, 400, 500, $1 million house. And so realtors have been making all this money. But you know what the problem is that with that, Robert?
Well, and beauty is in the eye of the beholder, I think, is what's wrong with it.
Well, what's wrong with it is that the allegation goes something along the lines of, if I'm a seller and I'm selling my house, I'm listing it with a real estate agent, and the real estate agent charges me 5%. Part of that 5%, let's say it's half, 2.5%, gets paid to the buyer's agent. Why am I, as a seller, having to pay the buyer agent? So let's jump into this article, and then we're going to tap into Robert's mind and history, where we learn about where did buyer agency come from to begin with, why this lawsuit may not have wings here in Toronto, and what the Toronto Regional Real Estate Board has already in place, separating these two components of the commission. Let's start with the article here. It's entitled Class Action Against Toronto Real Estate Industry Over Commissions Gets Green Light. It's in the Financial Post. We'll link to it. And if you want to play detective, you can also Google the US commission lawsuit. But basically, this has taken 2 years of deliberation. Federal court has finally given a green light for this class action lawsuit. And Robert, does it count if, for example, I listed my house with myself as a real estate agent? Would I get money for having charged myself commission? Does that make sense?
No, I'm not even going to wade into that one. That's too much of a...
That's too much of a confusion to mine. But basically,
Yeah, I am my own grandpa. Do you know that song?
something like that. Okay, anyway, this was first filed in April 2021, but basically anyone who sold a home in the GTA after 2010, so real estate chat viewers who have subscribed so that you don't miss this sort of thing and have clicked like so far in this article, if you bought a house, or sorry, if you sold a house in the GTA after 2010, you may be entitled to compensation. You know, those commercials that pop up on TV, you might be entitled to a settlement. Or whatever it is, alleges misconduct by several of the nation's leading brokerages: Century 21, Remax, iPro, Canadian Real Estate Association, Toronto Regional Real Estate Board. All of these are named in the lawsuit. And basically, the lawsuit contends that the brokerages engaged in an agreement to artificially increase buyer brokerage commissions, which were shouldered by home sellers in the Greater Toronto Area. It also alleged that the Canadian Real Estate Association and the Toronto Regional Real Estate Board facilitated and contributed to the execution of this arrangement. You guys can read this article, but basically, Robert, this lawsuit exists because of the assumption that commissions are bundled and that the seller pays for their agent as well as the buyer agent. And I guess to top that off, the allegation says that the consumer is not aware, perhaps, that they're paying the buyer agent's commission. Where did buyer agency come from, first of all, Robert?
Well, this is a long and winding road, but let's go quickly. There was some noise brought against the Canadian Real Estate Association, Toronto Real Estate Board, and it came up with a prohibition order, things you could not do anymore in 1990, and there was quite specific things that you had to do. And then in 1995, buyer brokerage was introduced to the Toronto real estate market. It was in other places. And what it said was, instead of having two firms, we call them brokerages now, but two firms, all working for the seller, the one working with the buyer is a sub-agent of the primary one that has a listing. but they're both working for that same person and the buyer has no representation. So they said, okay, you got to change this around. You got to introduce a way for the buyer to be represented. And they said, okay, we'll have buyer brokerage, but how are we going to work the money? This is, well, the money's not important. What's important is the agency, because you can contract for the money to flow in a number of different ways. Around the world, it flows in many different ways. But since we're used to it flowing through the seller to the listing broker and to the person working with the buyer, we'll continue to do that with it. However, what we're going to do is we're going to unbundle the fees. And we're going to say you can make an arrangement, a listing agreement, a seller representation agreement with the seller as the listing broker I'm talking. And you will talk to him about two numbers. One number is the total amount of commission that he will pay. So let's pick a number 5. Okay. And that's the total he will pay. And then you, in consultation with that seller, you'll agree with that seller on what portion of that 5 you will pay to induce another registrant who works in the real estate business with buyers to sell that particular property at an acceptable price. Sometimes it's 1% and the people keep 4. Sometimes it's the other way around, where they say, okay, we want the greatest incentive possible, so we'll pay out 3.75 or whatever it is of the 5 to the co-op firm. That's what we call it now, because they're not agents of the seller anymore. They're working for the buyer. They're the buyer broker. And we call it a co-op fee for cooperation. So that's how it's been for the longest time now. The contract reads that way, that the total, which is now not part of the information sheet that's distributed to members, not shown. The total, that's between private information between the listing broker and the seller. All that goes on the information sheet is what is the co-op fee that's offered as an incentive to bring your customer to my house. Okay, so it's an incentive. Now, it's built into the purchase price. It's a part of the purchase price, and the buyer finds that out. He says, well, do I have to pay you? How does that work? He says, no, it's built in. So he knows about it. He says, well, what about when I'm qualifying for a mortgage? Do I have to put down a certain amount for that and some certain amount for the house and the deposit? And he says, no, it's all included in the same thing. We use the same money. You put the deposit down, and that's the first part of your purchase price. Let's say you put $10,000 down on a $200,000 property. That $10,000 is the first $10,000 of the purchase. And then when you go to your lender, you say, well, I put 10 already as part of the purchase, and so that counts towards your down payment. And then I'm going to put another 25, so I'll have a total of 35 as a down payment that I need a mortgage for the rest. So you get, as the buyer, to use the funds twice. The cooperating brokerage gets paid through the listing broker, so that that's the process we're used to. But the agency, the who are you working for, was severed. There's a special form that you use when you prepare an offer. You do this disclosure of agency interest. And so the buyer has to sign it, and the seller has to say, I understand that ABC firm is my company, and XYZ is representing the buyer. And there is no relationship between the buyer's representative and me. I'm paying him, but I'm doing that as an inducement, so he'll do what I want. So
interesting. So you know what? So sorry, go finish your thought.
Okay. So the person who has piggybacked on an American lawsuit, and that's all this one is perhaps they're waiting for the one in the United States to move along a little bit so they could decide whether this one has any merit or not. Now, what we were just reading, as you quite accurately say, allegations. This is the best foot forward by the proponent, by the advocate, by the lawyer who's putting forth this lawsuit. And he's calling it a class action suit. So that's why he says it everybody since 2010. Why 2010? Why not from the beginning of time? It's spurious. This is a legal term that you dismiss an argument like this as without merit. Anyway, it's going to go through the court, and someone's going to have to pay the fees. Now, the Canadian Real Estate Association, they don't want to get involved in any of this. The Toronto Real Estate Board, they'll say, that's not my job. I do the forms. If the forms come through the Ontario Association, why don't you all these were approved in the Competition Bureau the last time you came after us for monkeying with the content of the feed of data that we send for free to independent companies. Anyway, so there's been a long attack of the real estate business because it's considered that the real estate commission is too high. Now, The real estate commission is a commission. If you don't do the job so that the person who has agreed in the beginning accepts the proposal, there's no commission.
Mhm.
So it's not money, it's not earnings, it's a commission. It's if you do what I ask you to do, then I will pay you, as I've said at the outset. Now,
Yep.
the thought that the commission that's built into the price is somehow damaging to the buyer because he did not know. It might be the particular circumstances of the dullard who has started this whole thing, Mark Sunderland or whatever it is. If he wasn't explained it, or perhaps, like, everybody has two sides to the story, and you never say that the part of the story that's doesn't go your way. Maybe he didn't ask. Maybe he was so in a hurry to acquire this certain property, and there was such a rush, he didn't ask any of the questions. He didn't review any of the documents. Maybe he had a really dullard of a representative who was registered and should have known the steps of disclosure and should have made sure that it was all understood. But maybe they didn't because the pressure of time. Who knows?
Mhm.
So we got a court case here that flies in the face of the prohibition order, flies in the face of buyer brokerage, flies in the face of the operation of the listing agreement, of the buyer agency agreement, and the cooperation and representation agreement that's part and parcel of every transaction. If you're on the Toronto Real Estate Board, if you're a member of the Ontario Association, if you're a member of the Canadian Association, you do it this way, or else you're in violation of non-disclosure. So I can only guess that it took 2 years for the federal court to let this thing go ahead because, okay, try it. And if it gets kicked out, then, he gets kicked out. The lawyer's taken it on a contingency basis, I'm sure. So he's fronting all the money at the beginning. And if they induce or intimidate one of these large players, trade associations, to make a settlement offer, give them $9 million. Maybe that's a lot of money to the guy, and he'll settle for that. He gives his lawyer a third of it or a half of it. Maybe that's all he wants. He doesn't care about the class action. He just wants it to make a name for himself, or maybe wants to make money. Maybe he's got an itch to scratch about the real estate business. Now, I have enough itches to scratch about the real estate business, but when I see something that's not true, I try and dispel or broadcast the untruth so that many more people will know that it sounds like one thing, but it's actually something quite different.
Well, that's the interesting part. And thank you, Robert, for that thorough explanation and a study of history, because if I understood Robert correctly, for the past 28 years then, that this buyer agency has existed, and for 28 years or so, plus minus whatever it is,
1995. Yeah.
1995 to 2023, so 28. So basically, we've been doing it right, because on a Toronto Regional Real Estate Board, for those of you who have recently sold a house, you do see if your realtor does things properly and discloses things properly, there is a separation between a total commission that is charged for a successful sale, or a contingency fee, whatever you want to call it, and what is actually offered. It's an offer to the buyer agent. Now, some might argue that, hey, you know what, even though those are separated, 5% is a very high commission. And, since prices have gone up, 1995 average price was how much? Off the top of your head, maybe what?
A third.
A third. So why am I paying 5% today on $1 million house? And that's a subjective argument. I mean, at the end of the day, you can negotiate. First of all, how we squash this argument is you can negotiate any fee with your realtor. And it's also up to your realtor whether they say yes or no to that. And of course, even from the beginning of time, everybody could have sold their home by themselves, for sale by owner. There's discount brokerages, there's flat fee brokerages, there's low fee brokerages, there's no fee brokerages, there's everything brokerages.
You've hit the key point there, because that's how the real estate business started. Builder was selling 5 houses and he couldn't get anything going on. And the salesman came up to him and said, if I get you $1,000 more, if I get you 20,000 instead of the 19 that you want, will you pay me 1,000? And the builder said, you're going to sit there all weekend? You're going to talk to that crazy buyer? You're going to arrange the financing? You're going to hold his hand all the way through the closing? Yeah, if you can do all that and get the guy to pay more than what I want, then you can have the difference. And that's how it started. 1920 is when the board was founded. There was real estate brokers from the beginning of time. You see in the Western movies, there's somebody with their, a land office. Anyway, so you can always sell it yourself. If you choose to use a more expedient fashion, and the deal that you enter into at the outset has a commission built into it, and it's being distributed this way, and you were told all about it, then the seller should have no problem with that. Now, he doesn't want to pay any more than he has to, but if this 5%, let's say, gets him 9% more than he ever could have got on his own, then he's a winner. Now, the buyer side is different. The buyer's not compelled to buy that house. He can buy anything. So you're saying it's a conspiracy. You're saying you're all doing it, playing, saying, well, that's not true. There are all kinds of different business models that are encouraged by the real estate council, the registrar, and the administrator of how all real estate practitioners must operate and what they must do and what they must not do, and the discipline, blah, blah, blah. So there's different ways that you can do it. You can do nothing. You can charge them $1,000 and you never lift a finger apart from submitting the forms all the way through to full service, where you stage it and you do this and you do that and you lend the guy the down payment or the deposit or all kinds of things. So I'll be very interested to see who represents the industry, which lawyer is chosen, and I don't care how much it costs to get this case dismissed, or if it goes to a trial, that's what they do with class action lawsuits, have it examined and have the points beaten one by one by one by one. And that's my personal view. I think the points will be beaten because either the person drafting this article has misrepresented what's in the action suit, class action suit, or the lawyer doesn't understand the real estate business, or the proponent behind who tried to gather the support. It's not easy to gather support for something, except if you get somebody to pay the cost at first. So,
well, as you said, the reason why it's probably looking to make a quick buck here is that the timing is kind of odd that in the US, the two major lawsuits, one of them has already reached proposed settlements. And we're talking about double-digit million, like $55 million settlement from Remax, for example. And the only reason
you divide that by 10, and that's what the Canadian example, it says $5 million across Canada. It's pittance. It's nothing, but it's 55 million divided, by the third.
It's a bit of noise, because the reason why maybe the merit of this is just to get a settlement. Maybe that's the game here, but
that is the whole thing. They don't want to argue it. They want a settlement, and that's where they're going to make their money.
And will it change anything, Robert? Will it change the industry? Because let me propose this. Let's say this was a bona fide lawsuit that was intended to change the world of real estate, because apparently it's broken, even though there's all options that currently exist, all compensation models that exist. No matter what, there is a prevalent, whatever you call it, it would be anti-competitive to say, hey, yes, every single transaction should be at X amount.
They used to call it a tariff. So the tariff was abandoned. It was prohibited. No more tariff. It can't be.
Now, there is a prevalent...
Deal by deal, person by person, you set what the price is going to be.
Right. And even though some may say there's a prevalent, whatever the commission might be, the truth of the matter is, if you as a client negotiated with your realtor, it's up to you and your realtor to agree on that. And nobody
at the outset, before you begin.
Exactly. Nobody enforcing it. So let's say this lawsuit went beyond your settlements and discovered that, hey, the real estate model is broken, Robert.
Yep.
And you know what? Buyer agents can no longer be offered a commission. Well, not offered outright, but let's say, for example,
that might be.
Let's say there's a decoupling.
Yeah.
Right. As a seller, I represent my seller. I negotiate my commission with the seller.
Yeah.
And let's say it happens to be a 2.5, or let's say I charge 3 or 4% to my seller.
Yeah.
And now it's up to the buyer and their agent to come up with how they're compensated.
Yeah.
And let's say, for example, it goes extreme. Now, in the current model that exists today, which is why this lawsuit is mind-blowing, in the current model that exists today, a seller can offer as little as what, 1 penny if they want
anything more than a penny. Yes.
More than a penny.
Not zero.
I hope somebody on this lawsuit team is watching this, because right now the seller can offer whatever they want. Let's say that even was eradicated. What would happen then to a buyer looking for their agent, and how would they pay commission at that point, Robert?
Well, then apparently this is the way it's done in Europe. You would have to have negotiated and then pay a sum or a percentage to the representative, to the broker, to the registrant, a fee for finding the property. like a finder's fee, and perhaps you would pay it up front. You know, you don't want to pay a grand amount, so you pay a small amount in the beginning and the same amount on acquisition, and everybody's happy. You don't get anything from the seller, and you don't owe the seller anything, and the seller isn't offering you anything. So it's completely separate transaction. Now,
Okay, so then let's say the buyer doesn't want their own buyer agent, and I call you up. You're the seller's agent, and I call
yep,
you up and say, "Hey, Robert, I don't want to work with a buyer agent because I don't want to pay them a commission. I want to buy directly through you," which also exists. By the way, this already happens too in the current market. But let's say there's no buyer component to commission. So how would that now be dealt with?
okay. Well, this is now being anticipated by the changes of the renamed Real Estate and Business Brokers Act. It's now called the Trust in Real Estate
Services.
Act. And they have a category. There's no more customer service and client. There's unrepresented party, which means someone who is not represented by anybody, who is representing themselves. And there's now restrictions that have been put on what can come out of your mouth and the actions that can be done by someone. If you're approached by someone who says, I don't want to have anything to do with it, I just, if you want to do the paperwork, that's okay, but you could deal with the seller. I'm going to just handle things myself. I'm unrepresented by any registrant under the Real Estate and Business Brokers Act, renamed as TRESA. And so this is now going to happen. And December the 1st, the full complement of rules of this Part 2 and Part 3 of the reorganization of the Real Estate and Business Brokers Act will come to be. So it could just be that it will become moot, this lawsuit. They can try and go back, but they got to prove each and every one, I guess. Now, the Ontario Association's sitting on a lot of money, and the TREB is sitting on a lot of money, and they decide to just get rid of it by paying out 4 million, 6 million, whatever it is, and to make the guy go away. Well, I guess it's just a business expense, even though you're a non-profit organization. And so the government pays for you. And again, they're always dealing with somebody else's money they've collected in the reserve funds over 50 years. And, they want the problem to go away. So that's why they pay settlements, just to say, go away.
So fasten up and let's see how this goes. But takeaways now for our Real Estate Chat viewers who are real estate agents. Robert, wouldn't it be fair to say as real estate agents, be prudent in explaining, first of all, understanding, we all went through licensing courses, but understanding how to explain agency, understanding how to explain your services offered over and above the commissions. Like you can open up with a commission discussion, but if you don't explain what you're going to do to your clients, real estate brokers, salespeople, realtors, everybody watching this who's licensed, if you're not explaining what your service is and what your duty is to your client, you're already doing them a disservice. And then let alone bundling the commission without explaining the fact that there's a listing component to it. There's what we're offering or inducing or incentivizing a buyer to bring a property to your home and to your listing. What about for our Real Estate Chat viewers, though, for the general public who's going to sell their house? Robert, what's your advice to them?
Well, ask questions. Anything you don't understand, then ask questions about it. And this whole idea of disclosure, you're supposed to, as a registrant, you're supposed to volunteer, tell, explain everything according to the rules and regulations. You don't have a choice in it. You are required to make a disclosure of agency, of the things that could happen, of the options that might happen. What if somebody from my firm comes in, brings a customer? What if somebody from the MLS does? What are we going to do? And then the contract specifies there's a fee and the total and the amount that you all agree to be the inducement to the cooperating broker. So the December 1st changes will change things, and we're going to have a new whole set. Apparently it's 12 pages. Right now we have like 3 pages. 12 pages of explanation of the disclosure phase. So it will be more paperwork. It will be a little more chit chat about that. And we'll have to develop a whole sales talk or disclosure talk, whatever you want to call it, as part of the introduction to selling your home or acquiring a home. And I don't say it's bad. It's just, we got to do more.
So there you have it. This was a pretty extensive episode because the details of this lawsuit, as we probably learn about it and it unfolds, we're going to get to see and decipher whether or not there's merit to it. We'll watch it. And Real Estate Chat viewers, if you have not subscribed yet, please click on that subscribe button so that you can always be up to date with what these two real estate brokers are chatting about. Leave in the comments what you think about this. If you think it's something that's worth pursuing, tell us why. If you hate real estate commissions, tell us why. And you know what? If you have alternatives for your real estate, the way it's being conducted currently, give us some ideas of what you think about that. But thank you for watching this episode, and we'll see you in the next episode of Real Estate Chat. Take care and bye for now.
See you later. Thank you very much.